The most recent topic of discourse surrounding Bridgerton is a debate about whether or not Violet Bridgerton is a good mother. This is often accompanied by a parallel debate about whether or not Anthony should be considered a father figure in the Bridgerton household. Both the complexity of the relationship between Violet and Anthony, as well as whether or not Anthony could or should be considered the father figure of the Bridgerton family, warrant entirely separate videos that I plan on creating. But there's a lot of really interesting things to consider when talking about Violet as a mother. Firstly, what makes a good or bad mother is almost entirely subjective, so it's difficult to define in the first place. There's a valid argument to be made for either when it comes to Violet, as she certainly hasn't been perfect.
I know I do not always say the right things, and then the things I do say, well, they are not always what you wish to hear.
And has had her fair share of missteps. But then it begs the question, why do so many people think perfect is synonymous with good when it comes to motherhood? It's also important to note that Violet is a product of her time, so while she may do or say things that by today's standards would be considered bad parenting, that critique isn't necessarily applicable when so many of those behaviors were simply the norms and customs of that time period. The maternal portrayal of Violet is complex. It's neither entirely positive nor entirely negative. She makes multiple mistakes and has many moments which do not cast her in the best light, particularly in her relationship with Anthony. It's also relevant to note that she likely didn't really have much conflict with any of her children in the years that Edmund was still alive. Much of the conflict that she has with them now stems from either the resentment and trauma of his death, or their being out in society. Even Anthony said,
"You were a perfectly reasonable mother until your eldest daughter came of age."
She's working within an oppressive system and trying to conform her children to fit society's ideals because she thinks that's what's safest and best for them. There is validity in this point of view, as obviously their status, their wealth, their privilege all depends on them being upstanding citizens, but at the same time, she also lacks imagination and can't account for anybody kind of breaking out of the mold. So it's reasonable to assume that prior to this traumatic event with Edmund and her children coming into society, she was likely an even less flawed mother than the one we came to know in the timeline of the show. Many of the maternal qualities that Violet routinely displays have both positives and negatives to them. While Violet is a very active participant in the lives of her children, always present, always involved, she can often be overzealous and, as a result, overbearing and suffocating to her children.
I think it a pleasant morning for a promenade. Tell me everything. How do you feel?
What about the Ramsby Ball Friday, too? Oh, and what about the Grand Picnic?
We shall see, Mamma.
What do you have in your hand?
Nothing, Mamma. It's only a pamphlet.
Mrs. Wilson?
Oh, Mother, please.
Francesca?
There's no need to shout.
What about the Duke? The Duke has not proposed, Mamma.
She's meant to be quite the reader.
Were I looking for a list of debutantes and their dubious accomplishments, I could have stayed home and read Lady Whistledown.
No. Mother, are you quite well?
No, she is not.
Tell me one more time what precisely the Queen said to you, dearest.
Again, Mamma. She was splendid. She sparkled brava.
I know it is unlike you to cajole your children.
You mock me.
Violet has many qualities which make her an emblem for what embodies a good wife and mother during this time period. Her abilities as a hostess, her deportment, her social finesse, all of these contribute to upholding the status and therefore privilege that the Bridgertons have enjoyed. But along with this comes an obsession with image and the pursuit of perfection that weighs heavily on each of her children individually and the family as a whole.
People are looking, dear. Congratulate the happy couple. Just keep smiling.
Can a smile be enough to save the Featheringtons?
Lovely day, is it not, Lady Richmond? And we shall go about our daily lives as if nothing has happened, as if nothing is awry.
And no one will be the wiser. Or pretending that nothing is amiss is the perfect way to lure the ignorant into submission. Is it not, Mamma?
United as the most respectable family that we still very much are. We are out like any other family, having ice cream and planning a wedding.
Do not fret, Mamma. I will still be in attendance at your ball.
Participating in this farce along with the rest of us.
I am doing this for all of us.
She often neglects the emotional needs of her children in favor of projecting a positive image to the public.
It is the heat. The Duchess is quite overcome. We proved to the Ton that our story is true. It was indeed a mutual decision between all interested parties, and there is no scandal or ill will between our families at all.
Another ball, so that the Ton might inspect this wreckage with an even closer eye.
Because of this, all of her children at various points are besieged by feelings of inadequacy and forced to play pretend. One of the most interesting elements of Violet as a character, which is made clear in her parenting, is the fact that she truly struggles to comprehend or consider perspectives that differ vastly from her own. We see so much evidence of this throughout the show, in the way she fails to educate Daphne about sex.
If your motherly advice had actually prepared me to wed.
Whatever do you mean?
I mean, Mama, that you sent me out into the world no better than a fool.
In the way that it is absolutely incomprehensible to her that Antony might want a practical marriage.
Love shall have no place in my marriage.
You cannot mean that.
I seek an amiable partner with whom I may share a pleasant life, untouched by heartbreak and the ravages of grief.
You requested my ring?
Father's betrothal ring. I should simply like to be prepared for when the opportunity presents itself.
The opportunity?
I've already compiled an index of the season's eligible misses and have arranged interviews.
Interviews? Dearest, I shall be more than happy to give you my ring when you find someone with whom you are very much in love.
In the way that she misinterprets Lady Danbury's comment about being lucky to have had Edmund in Queen Charlotte. In almost every single one of her interactions with Francesca and Eloise, she has a somewhat limited mindset and operates from a good faith belief that everyone can and should have the kind of experience that she has had. That everyone should have the same perspective, the same desires, the same kind of romantic relationship.
Our mother also has an obsession with great love stories.
My dear, why ever do you complicate matters so? You must simply marry the man who feels like your dearest friend.
Oh, is that it, Mama? Well, how very simple indeed.
Yes, quite. What I wanted, dearest, was for you to have the best. Not in terms of rank, but love. You deserve the feeling that I had the moment your father placed that ring on my finger.
Why will you not accept that the love match between you and Father was the exception, not the rule?
Because I wish for you two to know the joy of an exceptional marriage. Wish for Francesca the same thing I wanted for myself. For Anthony, for Daphne. Passion, excitement, a love that is thrilling. You know, when I first met your father, I could barely speak my own name. I was so taken by him. I stumbled over words most familiar.
Ma, I thought we had moved past this.
She struggles to not only account for the possibility that someone might be different, but then struggles to relate and interact with people who are so vastly different from her, as we see with Eloise and Francesca. But where there's negatives, there's also positives. She's very warm, always referring to her children by endearments.
Allow them to come to you, dearest. Dearest, dearest. Some toast, dearest, dearest, dearest. My dear, dearest. Good night, dear. My dear. It will be a most special time, dear. Dear, is this your concern? Dear. Dearest. Darling. Dearest. My darling girl. Dearest. Dear. There you are, dear. Dearest. She is a lovely diamond, dearest. Did not expect you to return so soon, dear. My darling boy. Benedict, dear. My darling. Eloise, dear. My dear. Anything, dearest. My dear. Dear. My dear. My brave, clever girl.
And displaying physical affection. She's highly involved, always interested in, keeping tabs on, and being an active part of her children's lives. She's very observant, always attuned to when something is wrong with her children. She's always there for her children, and at the end of the day, she stands by them no matter what. For all of her errors, she also has moments with each of her children where she offers them really sound advice.
We chose to love each other every single day. It is a choice, dearest. One that is never too late to make. As if love had become some weakness instead of your greatest strength, and that is not you.
I do not have time for this.
Well, perhaps you might wish to make time. Because real, true love is worth it. No matter what. I do not blame you for putting on armor lately. But you must be careful that the armor does not rust and set so that you might never be able to take it off.
For better or worse, she very obviously cares about her children. But she also has a very different relationship with each one. Very quickly, just to preface this discussion of Antony and Violet's relationship, I am in no way saying that Antony was correct in these situations, or that he didn't deserve to be told off at various points, but more so just examining the ways that Violet chose to respond to the situation that can be damaging in parent-child relationships. Violet's relationship with Antony is by far the most complex, and therefore the most tumultuous. Most times we see Violet and Antony interact in Season 1, it's in a somewhat antagonistic fashion. Even though Antony has been acting as the head of the household for almost a decade at this point, Daphne's debut in society requires an entirely new level of involvement from him, so this marks something of a crossroads in their relationship and the way they interact with each other. Though Violet makes some very valid points about Antony needing to step up, it's often her delivery that's troublesome, as she resorts to passive aggression and intentionally painful jabs to get her point across.
Tonight, when you leave this study that you continue to keep at your family home...
I am resolved to handle matters differently in the future.
Or perhaps not at all.
It is not bravado, or denial, or even immaturity.
It certainly appears that way to me. If your father was still here, Daphne would already have been matched. Perhaps your bride would like the same. What time do you have?
What?
The time. You were just checking your father's old watch when I caught you, yes? It is a lovely heirloom.
With Lady Danbury accepting your dear mother's gracious invitation on my behalf, well, however could I have declined?
Perhaps we might begin with why you chose to interrupt such an exquisite morning. Time, as we both know, is certainly of the essence. Are you merely an older brother, or are you the man of this house?
There's a genuine power struggle happening between them, as while Violet is much older, more experienced, and the parent in the equation, Antony is technically the head of the household. This is mandated and dictated by society, and it winds up putting both of them in an unnatural and often adversarial position. It's really this system which breeds hostility between them, as this structure requires Antony to be in a position he doesn't want to be and never asked to be, while also stripping Violet of the authority she's rightly earned as a parent. As a result, they resent each other, both when they fail to assume these positions and when they successfully assume these positions. Regardless, Violet often seems to place unfair and unrealistic expectations onto Antony, whether it be because of his being her first child, the oldest brother, the man of the house, the de facto partner in the situation, or a combination of all of these complicated and contradictory positions. First, she criticizes him for not being present enough.
Should your brother wish to be obeyed as Lord Bridgerton, he must act as Lord Bridgerton.
Then she laments and resents his being too present immediately afterward.
Apparently he's managed our social calendar through June.
She expresses judgment for his having a mistress and provokes him to step up and take control while invoking his father, saying he already would have made an arrangement were he still alive. As a result, Antony ends his relationship with his mistress and makes an arrangement for Daphne to be married, doing exactly what she asked him to do, but she's not satisfied with this either.
I cannot imagine a greater show of disrespect than promising me to Nigel Burbrook.
Antony, tell me you did not.
She says,
You like to speak of responsibility. My dear son. Of duty? Pray tell, what should you know of it?
which is deeply dismissive of all the pain and suffering and sacrifice he's gone through as a result of becoming the man of the house at 19 years old. One thing that's made abundantly clear throughout the seasons is how much duty and responsibility Antony does shoulder, and we see endless evidence of this. He escorts Daphne to events, arranges her marital prospects, risks his life protecting the reputation of his younger siblings, handles all the finances, staff, and properties, manages their social calendar. It's endless. Though Violet might be right to demand more of Antony in this particular instance, it's unbelievably unfair for her to volley this kind of accusation at him, given all he has had to sacrifice from such a young age. Later, once he humbly comes to her expressing gratitude for her handling of the Burbrook situation and promises to resolve things differently in the future, she smugly throws out,
"Or perhaps not at all."
Not only is this a recipe for a total crisis of confidence and existential breakdown to so cavalierly toss out this label which has changed his life so indelibly, but yet again, it contradicts what she said earlier. First, he's not involved enough, then he's too involved, and when he finally comes to a happy medium, she posits that he have no involvement whatsoever. In that same conversation, she provokes him again by discussing Daphne and Simon, a match which he has legitimate and valid reasons to be opposing.
Most appropriate hem for your sister when she decides to marry the Duke.
Then she's sure to throw in one last jab about his wife, who they both know doesn't exist and is already a sore spot.
Perhaps your bride would like the same.
She also delivers all of this in such a passive-aggressive manner that there is no room for conversation or actual communication. Rather, it's really just a way for her to lash out at him and make him take it, all while maintaining an air of total innocence. Though the latter half of the season sees Violet and Antony being cooperative and on the same page as far as Daphne's matches are concerned, Violet then pivots to matchmaking for Antony, presenting him lists of women, forcing awkward interactions against his wishes, and consistently lamenting the fact that he's unmarried. I also want to acknowledge that I understand that Violet's general awareness or lack thereof in her children's romantic desires is largely a product of whatever's required for the plot. Her level of awareness is often to maximize narrative and romantic tension depending on the couple, so there isn't much internal consistency as to the level of observation she has with her children's love lives. For example, in season 1, it made the most sense for her to catch on so quickly to Daphne and Simon because of the similarities between her and Daphne. It forces Daphne to come to terms with her feelings about the Duke right in time for them to have that meeting in the garden. And it offers an extra level of tension when things are bad between the couple to have Violet so enthusiastic about their pairing. In season 2, to keep the love triangle plot going on as long as they possibly could, they made it so that Violet was pretty much totally unaware until the very end whether or not that actually made logical sense. In season 3, she doesn't pick up on Colin and Penn until it's time for her character to actually propel Colin to take action. In that same season, even in spite of a lot of direct evidence, it takes her way too long to come to terms with the fact that Francesca has feelings for John. She simply never noticed anything going on with Benedict and his love interest, or with Eloise and her love interest in Theo, because they didn't want to complicate those storylines. It's more of a contrivance for convenience than anything else, but it does produce some occasionally frustrating inconsistencies. In season 2, Violet goes from shaming him about not having done his duty,
Relying on your younger brothers to one day do the job that you cannot,
to shaming him for the way he's trying to do his duty.
This is the duty I must fulfill.
You will end up alone with such expectations.
You have wanted me to marry for years. And now you suggest I wait? I'm fulfilling my duty to this family, Mother. That is what takes precedence above all else.
Just because you are dedicated to this family does not mean that there should be no room left for love, Anthony.
She rightfully identifies that his approach won't bring him happiness and encourages him to look for a true love match, someone who's more similar to him, and yet, when he finds that, she's firstly apparently oblivious to it, and then discouraging of it.
Is this plan going to be a problem for you?
Mother,
I only ask because of what happened the last time you found yourself in such close proximity to Miss Sharma.
So whether it was written this way for plot convenience or actually in reference to their relationship and the arc of Violet, it still contributes to this idea that Antony can't do anything right in the eyes of his mom. In the time following Edmund's death, Violet, for all intents and purposes, wasn't a good mother, but I'm not sure how or why anyone would expect her to be. Her relationship with Antony is disproportionately affected by Edmund's death, because the responsibility of being the head of the family was chucked onto him instantaneously.
The other children, they cannot see it. Anthony! Go!
From that moment on, he was no longer one of the children she was protecting. He was the father figure she was ordering to go protect the children. Even just by sheer circumstance, Antony had no time or space to process this death or grieve it himself, as he immediately became responsible for everything. Violet effectively vanished after Edmund's death, leaving the children on their own, but more specifically, leaving Antony to be their anchor, to be their parental figure on his own. She tells him to his face that she wishes she had died, that the baby had killed her. It's brutal. He begs her to show up at a family dinner, saying he knows that it's hard for her, but it's hard for them too, and she's incapable of doing that.
Do not ask me about family dinners. I am doing my best.
She's doing her best, but unfortunately, her best in this instance is not good. Now, from Violet's perspective, being 9 months pregnant, losing the love of your life in your arms before your very eyes, and then going into a grueling labor which almost kills you, how could she be any other way? As she said,
Edmund was the air that I breathed. Now there is no air.
This isn't a judgment or indictment on her as a person or even as a parent, but it is true that her grief prevented her from being a parent to her children at that time when they really needed her, and Antony bore the brunt of that.
You were barely even there. after he died. And yet I myself am cursed to remember every waking moment.
This, too, is not even necessarily Violet's fault. It's an impossible situation. It's also important to note that she wouldn't have had the same support system that is available to people today in the aftermath of Edmund's death. It's not as though she had access to great therapy or that mental health, particularly for women, was prized or had even been considered as a valid thing back then. I do think there's a point to be made here in the judgment that Violet has received from viewers as a result of these actions. A lot of this kind of judgment on mothers is rooted in a deep misogyny. There's this bizarre idea that women should just be better, they should be superhuman, should be moms first and foremost, but they're human beings. Things like postpartum depression or psychosis, trauma from birth or C-section, hormones, these are things that people somehow just expect women to shake off. But these are monumental life changes and experiences which are bound to alter people. There's this mythical notion that it's a choice, it's laziness or incompetence, it's malice, when really it's beyond their control. Many mental illnesses and addictions can also manifest in a similar fashion. Mothers can be, and often are, blamed for this, because who else is there to blame? But it's much more complicated and nuanced than that. This unrealistic expectation set on women to be able to withstand anything without shedding a tear is ludicrous, and yet it's the standard many women are held to. I'm not sure why these complexities and nuances can't coexist. People have a really hard time acknowledging that two things can be true at once. It can be true that what Violet did and how the situation played out absolutely traumatized Antony, but it's also true that Violet herself was going through something horrific and might not have had much control over any of it. Those two things can and do coexist. At the end of season 2, there's an extremely cathartic scene where Violet apologizes to Antony for all of this.
I'm so sorry that it was you who was with your father that day, and I am sorry for everything that happened in the days that followed.
The shame and regret etched across her face is evident. This has obviously weighed on her, just as it has weighed on Antony.
I wish I could change everything. It is what I think about every night before I close my eyes, and then again every morning before I open them.
This is a very pure moment of reconciliation and forgiveness, and also understanding and recognition and empathy shared between the two of them as they identify with one another. And they turn a new leaf for the rest of their relationship as she shares her experience, wisdom, and advice, which propels him into doing the right thing and results in Kate and Antony having a happily ever after. This fosters a happier and healthier relationship between Antony and Violet in season 3, where Violet also adopts Kate into the family as a daughter of her own, bonds with her over their shared history of being Lady Bridgerton, and expresses pure elation at their pregnancy announcement. Believe it or not, I actually have a lot more to say about the relationship dynamic between Violet and Antony, which I'll discuss in a separate video going through probably every single one of their scenes. And it was a truly messy and tumultuous ride there, but Antony and Violet were able to heal, which is so much more than can be said for many parent-child relationships and is a testament to both of them. There is no such thing as perfect in parenting, so one of the key elements to being a good parent is to be able to acknowledge what you did wrong, to apologize, and to change that behavior, and I do think that Violet has exhibited this quality. As far as Violet and Benedict's relationship goes, there's yet to be much individual interaction between the two of them. Benedict, as the effective black sheep of the family, is around the least, always slinking off to parties and events outside the ton. What we have seen of their relationship has been deeply playful, laughing, joking around.
I do hope the two of you are not encouraging improper topics of conversation.
Not at all, Mother. Escape through the chimney?
Quiet, she may hear you. Have you seen your brother or your sister?
Well, they managed to escape you. Good for them.
Whatever you have done to your brother, undo it.
Miss Edwina is merely agitated. She will come to her senses. Perhaps there's still time to change your theme. You do realise what tune she was playing just now, don't you? Mozart's Funeral March.
Oh, God.
Which makes sense given Benedict's personality. On occasion, we see her defer to him as the right-hand man, second son of sorts, to keep an eye on things, particularly with Antony.
Very well.
See that he is quite well.
Me? I'm not in need of coddling.
But as of right now, their relationship is largely underdeveloped, aside from a few small comedic beats here and there. I'm excited to see what they have in store for them in season 4, because I'd love to learn more about the particular dynamic that they have, and Benedict's book actually has one of, if not the most, lovely motherly moments from Violet throughout the entire series. Whether or not that will make it into the show is yet to be seen, but their relationship is sure to be expanded upon one way or another, with Benedict at the forefront. Violet's relationship with Colin seems to be one of the easiest and most natural. As I said in my Colin character analysis, Colin is shown to be somewhat of a mama's boy, and I think there's a deep sense of relief and respite from Violet when it comes to Colin that's not present in the rest of her children. There's a sense that she doesn't really have to worry about him. They have multiple scenes together that just show their companionship and camaraderie. In season 1, though she does express disapproval for his engagement to Marina, it has much more to do with her sadness at losing him than anything else.
I was not prepared to let another of you fly the nest so soon.
Have a fear, Mother. You will still have your hands full. Especially with Eloise. Good luck with that one.
And even despite her hurt at this information being kept from her, she quickly adapts in order to make Colin happy. She reaches out to Marina, telling her to call her by her first name. She braves the chaos of the Featherington household to try to get to know her better, and goes out of her way to be warm and welcoming of this prospect. She has a line where she says,
"It has long been Colin's greatest ambition to travel the world."
Showing how much attention she pays to Colin, his dreams, his desires, how she wants to support him, and how she's trying to facilitate a situation where him and his passion will be indulged, so he can be happy in the future. In season 3, there's a few very sweet moments of connection between the two of them, where her affection is very clear.
A gift for you, Mother.
Thank you. It is lovely. Truly. Oh my, we really are late.
He's obviously thoughtful and soft in many ways that others are not, and that's a fact that Violet confirms in the season.
You have always been one of my most sensitive children, always aware of what others need, always trying to be helpful or offering a joke to lighten the mood. You so rarely put yourself first. I am proud of your sensitivity.
She's almost single-handedly responsible for really getting Colin and Penelope together in the end. She's always open to answering any questions he might have and gives good, sound, well-rounded advice. She recognizes the situation for what it is, despite the front that Colin is putting up, and subtly but fervently encourages him to be brave and pursue what he wants. I think another reason why this courtship and relationship is met with such ease and understanding by Violet is that she understands and identifies with it as her and Edmund were a friends to lovers situation. She makes sure to follow up with him, offering him the time and space to speak more candidly about his feelings, but doesn't push too hard when he doesn't seem ready.
Is there something you wished to discuss with me?
That is kind of you, Mother. But it was purely a speculative question. I simply want the best for Francesca. I shall come down later.
She's overjoyed about their match and very accepting to Penelope already having seen and treated her like a daughter in the first place. She has utter faith and confidence in both of them and sees the merit in their match even when it's confusing to others. For Colin and Penelope's sake, she even makes nice with the Featheringtons, as unnatural as that is in the beginning. She notices when things are awry and worries for him and Penelope. Despite her feelings of anger and betrayal at the Lady Whistledown reveal, she ultimately stands right by Colin the entire butterfly ball as a system of support not only for him, but for Penelope. This is deeply uncomfortable and very difficult for Violet. As we've seen so many times throughout the series, she's so preoccupied with people's opinions and perceptions of her and her family. This is often utilized as comedic relief. It's a mildly exasperating and frustrating element to Violet's character that her kids can often roll their eyes at. But in a much deeper sense, this is actually something that has prevented Violet from being the best mother she could be in the past. As she prioritizes upholding this perception of perfection of her family, she often ignores or overlooks what's going on behind the scenes emotionally with her children. So, we actually see a little growth from Violet as a mother in season 3, as despite all of the scandal that this brings, she supports and accepts Penelope because Colin has asked her to. The last couple times that we even see Violet, she's shown on Colin's arm, holding on for dear life, grateful that he's staying near and dear, and again, being a very active grandmother to Colin and Penelope's child, as well as even a supporter of Lady Whistledown. For the most part, Daphne and Violet have a very positive relationship, and I think this is largely because they're very similar. Daphne's very similar to Violet as far as what she wants out of life and love.
We will all need to find love one day. Indeed. A love as pure as what Mama and Papa once shared, if we are so fortunate.
So, Violet's very good at relating to Daphne in this way. More so than any of her other daughters, Daphne's interested in and amenable to the marriage mart and all that comes along with it. This allows for Violet and Daphne to bond over fabrics, the modiste, which jewelry will catch a suitor's eye, who is the best match for her. They're also both grand romantics.
You and Papa. The two of you were so beautiful, Mama. That is what I wanted. That is all I hope to one day find. As did I.
Who seem to have internalized and taken on the pressures from outward society as far as appearances go.
She calls you a diamond of the first water.
It's obvious that Violet saw something of a similar status during her own time. Like Violet, Daphne's very concerned about the public perception of her and, as Eloise so eloquently put,
The game of pretend that you feel you must endlessly maintain.
they're both well-known and well-liked, classy, charming, confident, and essentially, at least from the outside, quote-unquote, perfect. Violet's protective of Daphne and identifies with her as far as the marriage mart goes. She's protecting her from Antony.
I sit with her in that drawing room. Do you know what I see? A young woman who is terrified because she knows what kind of life, what kind of future awaits her should you continue to get in her way.
From Burbrook.
Oh, you could not think I would ask that woman for tea without a thought for you, could you?
Pretty much from the prince.
Do you like it?
It is very beautiful.
But do you like it?
Prince Friedrich has asked for my permission to propose.
You need not decide now. You certainly have not known him long.
She shrewdly and correctly observes that there's genuine feeling between Daphne and Simon.
I saw the way the two of you looked at each other last night and this morning. There are no others. There is only the Duke.
And encourages Daphne to go after it, even after she's already given up.
No, I know my daughter. I know it was not nothing.
She's really great at comforting Daphne, and does so splendidly many times.
You will have comfort and a house to tend, and most importantly, children. You will throw yourself into raising your family, and you will find much joy. I am certain.
The massive and potentially only real blunder Violet makes when it comes to Daphne is her failure to give Daphne proper sex education.
I suppose I have put this conversation off for as long as I can.
I know nothing, I assure you.
Well, there are some things you ought to know.
Or perhaps you will send me off with more vague metaphors and trite remarks.
Much in the way that rain soaks a field in autumn, and in spring flowers grow. We had 2 hounds in the country.
Bassets, in fact.
That is right. Well, no one explained it to them, but there were puppies.
Though this wasn't a malicious act, it does result in some deeply detrimental effects on Daphne individually and within her relationship. This is obviously the sort of thing that has to be taken within the context of the world, as it was highly unusual and abnormal for women to discuss such things. Many are shown to be entirely clueless. It's easy to infer that Violet's own mom didn't give her proper education either, but Violet just happened to be lucky in her relationship with Edmund, where she could safely learn without any conflict. She assumes it will be the same for Daphne, but she's sorely mistaken.
Daphne, the two of you care for each other deeply. When all is said and done, nothing else matters. There's no reason to be concerned.
Regardless, Violet's personal discomfort came before Daphne's education, which is a huge problem that caused a lot of problems. Violet plays a part in rectifying this at the end of season 1, essentially orchestrating Simon and Daphne's reunion through the advice that she offers. She gives great insight, great inspiration, and a great speech which ultimately spurs on their reconciliation.
I wish I could do this. You are a Bridgerton. There is nothing you cannot do.
She's right there alongside Daphne, holding her hand through her birth, supporting her without taking any focus or attention on herself, and is shown to be a particularly active grandma to Daphne's son. In season 2, Violet and Daphne's similarities are more cemented than ever, as they walk side by side as dual hostesses, wives, and mothers.
And perhaps make the bouquets even bigger.
I have taught you well.
They talk about their marriages, their relationships, their perspectives.
Simon and I find some new stone to turn over. A new foible that one of us needs the other to tease out and inspect. It is decidedly irritating, yet incredibly gratifying at the same time.
Violet and Eloise have an interesting relationship in that Violet understands that Eloise is different and often actually does allow space for that.
Until you are officially out, you need not feel so strange tonight.
She vacillates between trying to push Eloise to fit the mold more and allowing her to do her own thing entirely, but all along there is a deep acceptance of who and how Eloise is as a human being. The outward pressure she exerts on Eloise to fit in or participate in society is flimsy at best and almost never comes at the expense of Eloise's true comfort or safety.
Taking your place in society should be an exciting time in a young woman's life. If you are not truly ready, I shall not ask you to play pretend. Perhaps I have been rushing you. We need not hasten your coming out before you feel prepared.
Violet and Eloise are on complete opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to their views on love and society.
I have taught you to believe that marriage is the best that life has to offer. And that remains true.
Marriage is in fact a prison for women.
But are similar in the sense that both of them are stubborn and can struggle to empathize with and understand drastically opposing views from their own.
Can you at least try to understand? You never see things from my perspective. You are not the only one with troubles, Eloise.
This can often cause them to butt heads as they really struggle to see each other's perspectives.
Things you should be learning yourself to prepare for your debut.
Making simpering conversation and pretending not to wince every time a man treads on my toes during a waltz.
Eloise.
I'm no good at those things, Mama. I should only make a fool of myself.
Well, perhaps if you devoted as much time to your deportment lessons as you did to writing in your journal, you might feel rather better.
Violet's reasoning behind pushing Eloise into the marriage mart is twofold, as not only is it the only discernible path toward a future for women that is known to her, but also because she truly believes that Eloise can and will find love.
What you must find, my dear, is happiness. Penelope, assist me here. Eloise could indeed find that with someone else, could she not?
This is a source of miscommunication, as Eloise often feels that Violet doesn't understand her and wants her to be something she isn't.
My rebellion is not some party dress I put on to play a part, Mama, and it is certainly not some accomplishment I have developed, like singing or painting to help me attract a suitor.
She views anything associated with being a debutante, which she rejects upon principle, to be an assault on her and her beliefs. She struggles to reconcile that traditional concepts of femininity can exist within her feminist ideology, and this is one of the main points of contention here. The only thing that Violet really wants her to do and is asking her to do is simply to participate. However, Eloise chafes at this, feeling it isn't who she is or what she wants, but this is more of a failure of this system which offers so few options to women than Violet herself. There's so much more room for compromise here, and Violet actually does a much better job of compromising than Eloise does. Violet makes a valiant effort to find a match for Eloise, not because it's what society expects, though that is a convenient coincidence, but because she truly believes that she could benefit from having a partner. She goes out of her way to find men to introduce to Eloise, to get Penelope to encourage her, to inviting a guy specifically for Eloise.
I invited Lord Morrison specifically for you. He's known to share your rebellious spirit.
She pays attention to what Eloise is reading, seeing that it's a pamphlet on the grooming of dogs, and recruiting Colin to see if there's someone who has that similar interest.
The tidying of dogs?
Yes. Perhaps you have a friend who finds the subject interesting.
She already knows and understands that this is hard for Eloise to begin with, so she tries to eliminate as many obstacles as she can. Essentially, both of them lack imagination, as Violet struggles to conceptualize a happy future for Eloise that doesn't include marriage, but Eloise fails to conceptualize the idea that she can participate in the marriage mart without actually changing who she is. Violet never appears to be laboring under the misapprehension that Eloise can or will change who and how she is. She doesn't expect Eloise to suddenly drop her personality and beliefs, but she does want her to try to participate. Violet loves who and how Eloise is, and in actuality is certain that someone else will too, and that's the core of her pushing Eloise toward courtship. She actually sees things in Eloise that Eloise is unable to see in herself, as we see so many times when Violet compliments Eloise.
You look lovely, dear.
I look like a prize calf trussed up for auction.
She believes in her capability for success more than Eloise does herself.
You will look so very lovely with it pinned up next season.
No, I will look like every other young lady in the room, except less graceful and more bad-tempered.
No matter what, you will always be a diamond to me.
Yet again, Violet's aversion to sexual education comes up in her relationship with Eloise, as she's the one to ask directly.
How does a lady come to be with child?
Eloise, what a question.
I thought one needed to be married.
Whatever are you talking about?
Apparently it's not even a requirement.
Eloise, that is more than enough.
I think by the time Eloise gets married, this won't be a detriment to her relationship like it was with Daphne, but still, the shame surrounding her curiosity on that topic that Violet transfers onto Eloise in this instance is not helpful. There is a level of despair or despondence Violet can sometimes express concerning Eloise's aversion to marriage and children that's especially ironic considering that Eloise was rather traumatized by Violet giving birth to Hyacinth.
You're not frightened too, sister? Of marriage? Of children? Surely you've not forgotten what happened to Mama? Her screams that night. You tried to hide it by her singing to me, but her voice... rattled the windows. I hear them sometimes still in my dreams. She almost died.
This isn't something they've discussed with each other, and I doubt Violet is even aware of it, but that being the catalyst for so much of Eloise's fear and rejection of motherhood ironically puts a rift between them that makes it hard for Violet to understand or connect with Eloise in the same way that she did with Daphne. One of the frequent blunders Violet makes with Eloise and even with Francesca is comparing them to Daphne.
Even Daphne felt most apprehensive at her first official ball, and look how well her season turned out.
Right.
She said you reminded her of Daphne, dearest.
I am not Daphne.
And your curtsy, dearest. Tell your sister how you managed such balance. You know, even Daphne.
Mama, do not trouble yourself.
It is just as it was with Daphne and the prince. But as with Daphne, you do not have to marry whoever the queen selects for you.
Daphne sort of set the gold standard, being the literal diamond of the first water, and it's obvious that Violet idealizes that position and experience that she had with Daphne. She tries to make them reprise that role, despite the fact that both of them are extremely ill-suited to it. In the process, she winds up making them feel inadequate or inferior.
I can feel people's eyes on me. Every time I walk into a ballroom, I know they are comparing me to Daphne. She was so good at being the diamond, and it made my mother so happy. I can never live up to that.
This obviously isn't Violet's intention, but regardless, it has the same effect. The way that Eloise interprets and internalizes Violet's, albeit mild, attempts to have her conform to society's customs is made clear when she says,
No, I'm a disappointment to you, so just allow me to take my leave and go to bed.
Violet is genuinely bereft and confused at this accusation because despite her behavior, I don't think it's an accurate representation of how she feels. This is no more evident than when, after Eloise's scandal breaks, she's encouraging her to talk to her friends, to go out. She might feel the weight of the scandal and be trying to mitigate it, but she's still not trying to change who Eloise is. She's not punishing her. She's allowing her to read, to go to the ball, encouraging her not to leave and to hold her head up high.
The only thing that would disappoint me is seeing you starting to care what anyone else thinks. That would not be you.
In season 3, it's clear that she felt responsible for Eloise's scandal when she says,
I spent enough time last season trying to assist her until my assistants nearly drove her outside society, so I am not interfering, for now.
And this is a great quality to have in a parent. She was able to admit and acknowledge when and where and how she went wrong, and rectified her behavior for the future. She sees the error of her ways and resolves to be different, not pushing Eloise at all this season.
You should know it is not my intention to push suitors on you this season, but perhaps you might become acquainted with a few other young ladies, so that your circle is wider than simply Miss Cowper.
She's observant about the toll that the loss of Penelope's friendship has taken on her. She wants her to have camaraderie, community, and belonging. She wants her to have people that will be there for her and support her through thick and thin. Instead of trying to control or forbid the relationship with Cressida that she doesn't understand, she's trying to make it so that Eloise has people to fall back on when Cressida inevitably disappoints her. At the end of season 3, she allows Eloise to leave the country so that she can explore new places and adventures, despite this being difficult and somewhat abnormal for a girl of her age. She allows this for Eloise's sake, because she wants her to be happy and to find what makes her happy. And she finally understands that what makes Eloise happy might not be what she had originally envisioned for her. Interestingly enough, I think that the relationship between Violet and Francesca is one of the most fraught out of all of her relationships. While she does struggle to understand Eloise, I think she actually struggles more to understand Francesca, despite her being more adaptable and easier to manage in the marriage mart. Eloise's opposition somehow makes more sense to Violet than Francesca's overall indifference. Violet obviously holds special tenderness and affection for Francesca in spite of, or perhaps even because of, the fact that she is so utterly foreign to her.
It would be pleasant to have my own house.
You were only a week back from Bath and already you were eager to escape us.
Violet makes several remarks about her distancing herself from the family, spending time in Bath, eventually moving to Scotland.
But you have spent so much time away from us already, in Bath with your aunt, or on your own when you are home. And now I fear I may be losing you for good.
And it's both because of that and how different they are that Violet really struggles to understand her, which I think she finds very frustrating and exasperating.
What you and Father and Daphne and Anthony will have is enviable, but it is also rare.
Despite Francesca's extremely valid point that that kind of love is rare, Violet finds it inexplicable that Francesca might not want or need love as she did, her fanciful romantic blinding her to reality. She obviously longs to be closer to Francesca in more ways than one, but doesn't quite know how to accomplish it, how to even talk to her. She haphazardly and clumsily tries to translate her words into metaphors that might appeal to Francesca.
Think of the balls as playing a duet. When you play with another person, there is a certain vulnerability which can be quite frightening, I would imagine.
As if she was incapable of understanding them in their original form.
But it is worth it. Once you find that person with whom you make an unexpected harmony.
But this too just cements Francesca's feelings of otherness. She recognizes that Francesca too is different and tries to meet her where she's at, enlisting the matchmaking help of Lady Danbury and searching specifically for fellow musicians, as one of the only things that Violet knows for sure about Francesca is her love for the piano. She learns her lesson from Eloise and adapts her behavior when it comes to Francesca, trying not to push too hard or be too suffocating.
After Eloise's fumbles last season, I am fearful of pushing another daughter too hard, but also fearful that without a push, Francesca will marry the first good enough match.
But once Francesca finally finds something that works for her and makes sense to her, Violet is opposed. Again, this opposition could very easily be a detail infused by the writers in order to set up Francesca's later season, but it was still frustrating to watch. Though she seems to have multiple breakthrough moments where it finally dawns on her, she finally understands and accepts and is happy for her daughter, those moments are then followed up with judgmental glances and apprehensive stares. She's clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but has no valid reason to oppose the match. She says,
"Why does it not matter if Francesca is happy?"
Which is absolutely the attitude a parent should adopt in this situation.
Still do not believe in this match, do you?
I have supported you.
You have been perfunctory in your support.
But yet again, her inability to see past her own conceptualization and understanding of what love is and what it should look like repeatedly wounds Francesca.
But I just...
Just what, Mama? Not every attachment must be dramatic and hard-fought. What John and I have is easy, and I love him, Mama. Even if it is not the love that you want for me.
She tries to be happy, expresses outward support, and goes along with it overall, even in spite of her own doubts or misgivings, especially once she realizes how important it is to Francesca. Toward the end of the season, Violet says,
I thought that is what love must be like for everyone. Surprising, forceful, quick. But you have shown me that there is another way, that there is beauty in the slow approach.
And it's clear that she's grown so much patience and respect and perspective as a result of this situation and this match. She says,
"You are already so wise beyond your years. I think you'll do very well in Scotland."
Which is so true, and something that Francesca not only likely wanted to hear, but truly deserved to hear. In the end, even at Fran's wedding, John dedicates his wedding speech to Violet.
Lady Bridgerton, I see your openness reflected in Benedict, your charm in Colin, your wisdom in Eloise, and a brightness you have instilled in both Gregory and Hyacinth.
Talking about how great of a mother she is.
In this moment, when I feel so much gratitude for my new wife, I feel it in equal measure for the remarkable woman who raised her.
As far as Violet's relationship with the two youngest Bridgerton children goes, there has, understandably, been very little conflict. She views them as they are and allows them to be. She might occasionally warn one of them about their table manners, throwing peas at each other, or being too eager with a house guest, but as she says, despite it being unfashionable, they really are a family.
All of you at one table, even the children.
I realize it may be unfashionable, but we like each other. Most of the time.
She finds obvious amusement and enjoyment from their antics where she could easily be annoyed or even angry, but she has a good relationship with both of them. Another one of her failures that is referenced briefly is the fact that she seems not to have discussed their father much as Gregory and Hyacinth grew up. Regardless of this, she always includes them in the fun. They're decidedly a part of the family, whereas many upper-class families in this time would entirely neglect or exclude the children. The bulk of her attention is understandably taken up by her older children who are in society, but we still often see her spending time with the youngest children, being physically affectionate, them included as part of the family. Mostly, I'm excited to see where their relationships go and how they progress as they become bigger characters and get their own seasons. But overall, she seems to have a very loving and positive relationship with them, despite the beginning of those relationships being so fraught with grief and pain and trauma. Seeing the change from how she behaved immediately after Edmund's death with Hyacinth and the way that she interacts with Hyacinth now is a world of difference. She obviously took the time to heal and then was ultimately better for it in the long run with each of her children, Hyacinth included. A lot of the failures of Violet can be attributed to the system that they were a part of during that time period. Her discomfort with sex education, the resentment she displayed toward Antony for the role that he was fulfilling, the pressure and focus she puts on getting her kids married off, all of this is features of the society rather than features of Violet individually as a person. The thing about Violet is that even though she has made many missteps and really dropped the ball at a lot of instances, she's also grown and learned and changed and apologized. And that's really all that you can ask of anybody, let alone a parent who is a person themselves and will be imperfect, as long as that person is willing to acknowledge and identify their mistakes and be better in the future. That's kind of the best that you can ask. And again, while there's more to be said about her relationship with Antony, she has so many little unspoken, unnoticed moments where she's being a good mother that are talked about so much less than the moments where she errs. So overall, Violet is by no means a perfect mother, but she is a pretty good one.